He comes in the form of the beggar, of the dissolute human child in ragged clothes asking for help. He confronts you in every person that you meet. As long as there are people, Christ will walk the earth as your neighbor. Welcome to the fourth and final week of this 4-week free class, See the Creator. In week 1, we found God expressed as love in the here and now, this present moment. In week 2, we closed our eyes and found God within. And in week 3, we opened our eyes and saw God everywhere. Week 4 is the crescendo, not to find God in the silence and fullness of your own being, or in the wild and unencumbered beauty of the forest and mountain, the waves, the stars, and the rolling thunder, but in the evolved and individuated expression of another conscious human being. Our lesson is as follows: gaze at another person, see the Creator. This is the most challenging lesson of all. But once you get this, once you can see the face of Christ in every person that you meet, you, my friend, are free. Accepting another person as one with the Creator is a powerful catalyst. It requires that you lay down pride, judgment, and expectation, and see with unconditional acceptance and innocent wonder as a child without labels and categories. Then, and only then, will reality reveal itself to you. Every single person, no matter how different from you, no matter how judged by society, regardless of their apparent limitations and flaws, every single person is just as divine as you and me. Every single person is the face of God to you. This is the secret to entering heaven. In the famous parable of the sheep and goats, Jesus says of those who did not help the poor and needy, "I was hungry and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison and you did not look after me." When further questioned, he states, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me." Oftentimes this passage is chalked up to a nice saying, but when you compare Christ's teaching in this text to that of mystics, spiritual experiencers, and sages from across the centuries, it becomes very clear that Jesus is not speaking in metaphor. He actually means what he's saying. You can't love God and not love another human being, because God is that human being. That human is a unique individuation of the divine light expressed in physical form. That human is an indispensable aspect of God without which God would not be in fullness. A Course in Miracles Workbook Lesson 158 says this: "Each one you see in light brings your light closer to your awareness." In other words, to know yourself is to know your brother and sister, and vice versa. The sages have said that to know God, you must know yourself, and to know yourself, you must know God. Because you are divine, to know one is to know the other. But it can also be said that to know God, you must know your brother and sister, and only after you have seen the divine light in them have you truly seen the face of God. 1 John 2, 9-11 says this: "Anyone who claims to be in the light but hates a brother or sister is still in the darkness. Anyone who loves their brother and sister lives in the light, and there is nothing in them to make them stumble." So in other words, when we see each other for who we truly are, only then are we in the light. You can't be in the light if you judge part of the light as darkness, because you have created that darkness in your own awareness, in your own judgment of them. And how do we see each other in the light? Through love. Lack of love is the only thing that causes us to stumble. But you may be saying, this is not so easy. It's one thing to find God in a peaceful meditation, or in the soothing sounds of wind and rain, or in my innocent dog licking my face, or my cat purring in my ear. People are a whole different arena. People can be so many levels of difficult. And there are 3 practices which I find helpful, which I would like to share with you. First, it's helpful to understand our human level of spiritual development. We as humans are at a very specific stage in our evolution. We are in what Law of One calls third density. Refer to last week's video if you're unfamiliar with this terminology. The purpose of third density is to develop self-awareness. In order to know God as the great I am, or the great consciousness of self, then we must know ourselves. We must be conscious of our existence. We must develop out of infinite, timeless beingness into awareness of our own existence. We must become self-aware beings. But in the beginning stages of this process, it is inevitable that we will be selfish and self-centered until we grow in our understanding. The next step in our spiritual evolution, fourth density, which is where we are headed now, is about the development of unity consciousness. Expanding our sense of self, our sense of I amness, to include our brothers and sisters. Recognizing that there is only one great I am, there is only one great self-aware being, and we are all part of that. But in order to get to this point, we first must have a sense of self. And right now, in third density, we are developing and expanding our sense of self. At our current level of development, we are like spiritual toddlers, just discovering the words me, mine, and I want it. In the same way that a tantrum-throwing child can be exhausting and challenging for a parent to deal with, no matter how much they love them, we can be challenging and exhausting for each other to deal with. But once you understand, this is just the level of growth and development that we are at collectively. There's nothing wrong with it. We are each an individual spark of the divine, just awakening to our sense of self, just discovering who we are. There is no condemnation or judgment, just like you wouldn't get angry at a tree for not being able to move around, or a wild animal for not comprehending human language, or a child for shouting, mine. So it is completely natural for a third density human, just learning the lessons of self-awareness, to act self-involved. You can't expect people to jump forward in their spiritual evolution. That's not the way it works. It takes most of us lifetimes to learn the lessons of self-awareness and develop into unity consciousness. Simply recognizing this can go a long way to seeing people with love and acceptance. Number 2, practice unconditional acceptance. Now, with the word acceptance, I don't mean that you have to accept everything that everyone does. Not all behaviors are acceptable. And as we develop towards unity consciousness, as we develop back towards our Creator, part of that process is differentiating between loving and unloving behaviors. What will be acceptable and allowed in society and what will not. This is part of the reason for the turmoil that we see in the world right now. People are awakening to the fact that the way we've always done things and the way that we've treated people is no longer acceptable. I can't treat you the way that society has always treated you because you are a person just like me, with feelings and rights and a sense of I, just like me. However, although we may not accept every behavior, we can still accept the person. We can, as Aaron Abke says, never put a person out of our hearts. Always hold space for people to be who they are, even if their behavior requires boundaries or correction. Always understand this person is on their path, finding their way, and ultimately all paths lead back towards knowledge of God. This person is one person seeking the divine in their own way. And if you can't accept the behavior, accept the divine within that person that is driving them to seek inner peace. Understand that they may be seeking God in a misguided way, just as a toddler may demand to eat nothing but cake, thinking that this will satisfy them. Everyone is looking for God, and most of us look in the wrong places, which drives us to insane actions, which will ultimately teach us through trial and error. I do want to take a brief moment to note that I realize there are some people who have suffered extreme trauma at the hands of others, and it may be impossible for you to even think of seeing the divine or seeing God in those who have caused you so much harm. This teaching may not be right for those who are still working through and healing trauma. In this situation, I would recommend focusing on your own healing first and maybe getting professional help to guide you along your path of healing. 3. Intentionally look for the divine in each person. Go out of your way to see it because it is always there. In most people, it's right at the surface, screaming at you. It's there in the things that make them unique, in their quirks and their differences. It's even there in the things that make them challenging, because our greatest weaknesses are also often our greatest strengths. Once you can see the divine in each person, loneliness and disconnection begins to lose its grip on you. Because every person that you see is God, with hands and feet and a face and eyes that can see you. While nature communicates to us God's presence and stillness, people communicate to us the personal aspects of God. God feels and loves and cares and hurts and cries and laughs and looks into our eyes and holds us in his arms. For many years, I searched desperately for God, and yet I would get irritated if people interrupted me when I was focused, trying to meditate or pray or channel inspiration for a project. I spent a lot of my life as an extreme introvert with social anxiety, shutting myself off from the rest of the world, afraid to open up and get close to people, afraid to have a conversation. I finally realized that's God interrupting me. I am shutting out and ignoring the very thing that I've been looking for. That's the inspiration I was channeling with hands and feet and a voice. That's the presence I was trying to connect to in my prayer. That's God talking to me. That's God asking me for something. That's God walking towards me. That's God knocking on the door. That's God on the other end of the phone call. That's God making small talk with me in the grocery aisle. That's God cutting me off in traffic. I know this language is triggering for some. One of the most common challenges I receive on my videos and social media posts is, "Are you saying that we are God?" Now, I've actually never used this language publicly, "I am God." But innate in this question is the assumption that if I were to say, "I am God," I would be making myself equal with the creator of the universe. I would be saying that I, as a separate individual person, am claiming to be as powerful as the creator. And I agree that this is an arrogant and foolish statement. God, as evidenced by every mystic and NDEer and holy book, is far beyond our ability to comprehend. In near-death experiences, when people get to that place of no thing, they always say that they can't even understand what they saw, let alone try to put it into words, because as soon as they put it into words, they make it something that it's not. And so I usually don't use the language, "I am God," but instead I'll say, "I am divine." You are divine, which means I am part of God, not God in his entirety, but the same essence, the same substance that God is. This means that you are also exactly what I am. My cat and the tree outside the window and the rain falling from the sky are just as much God as I am. And sometimes, especially in reference to people, I do find that using the phrase, "there's God," or "that's God right in front of me," is exactly what I need. The shock value of it brings me face to face with the truth. That person that is irritating me or presenting a challenge for me or interrupting me when I'm in the middle of something is God enfleshed. Not in the sense of being a separate self that is on the same level as God. No such thing as a separate self exists. But in the sense that they are God's spirit wrapped in flesh. God is right in front of me. So I should stop wasting my time looking for God in all of these other things and pay attention to what is right in front of me. In the words of Eckhart Tolle, being is the eternal, ever-present, one life beyond the myriad forms of life that are subject to birth and death. However, being is not only beyond, but also deep within every form as its innermost, invisible, and indestructible essence. This means that it is accessible to you now as your own deepest self, your true nature. But don't seek to grasp it with your mind. Don't try to understand it. You can only know it when the mind is still. What you have connected with in your own being over the last couple of weeks of this class is also within every other human walking the face of the earth. Every single one of them has the same expansiveness, silence, and light within them. Few are aware of this, but if you can see it, you can create an environment within your presence for that to be drawn out. A Course in Miracles puts it this way: see no one as a body. Greet him as the Son of God he is, acknowledging that he is one with you in holiness. And also, when you meet anyone, remember it is a holy encounter. As you see him, you will see yourself. As you treat him, you will treat yourself. As you think of him, you will think of yourself. And finally, teach no one that he is what you would not want to be. And how do you do this? How do you see each encounter as holy? How do you teach those in your presence what they truly are? That they are divine? That they are sacred? It is through recognizing that, as the law of one states, there is only one being in the universe expressing as many forms. You must first connect with the divine in you. You must first be filled within yourself so that you can see your brother and sister without need, attachment, or expectation, with unconditional acceptance. In week 2, the lesson was to gaze within ourselves and find God. But now in week 4, we recognize that every single other person in the world finds God in the same way. The same God that is within us is also within them. The concept of other is an illusion. There is no me and you. There is only I am. And every self-aware being shares the same sense of I. From my perspective, I am I, and you are you. You are a different point of consciousness called you. But to you, it's flipped. To you, you are the I, and I am the other. I am the you. And so it is with everyone else. Everyone experiences themselves as the I, which means that you doesn't exist at all. You is simply a mirage that disappears as soon as you try to pin it down. You is simply an illusion. We are all I. We are all the center point of consciousness. The separation is created by our bodies. If those barriers were taken away and I was to have access to your point of consciousness, we would discover that we are the same I. We spoke in week 1 of how past and future don't exist except in our minds. All that really exists is the eternal now, the present moment. In the same way, the concept of you doesn't exist except in our minds. All that exists is I, and we are all that same I. If this seems mind-bending to you, I recommend a simple exercise. When you are out among people, quietly observe. Look at a person and think to yourself, to them, they are the I. To them, they are the center point of consciousness. Then move on to the next person and think the same. As you move back and forth, feel the center point of I shift. One last quote from A Course in Miracles. Christ's vision has one law. It does not look upon a body and mistake it for the Son whom God created. It beholds a light beyond the body, an idea beyond what can be touched, a purity undimmed by errors, pitiful mistakes, and fearful thoughts of guilt from dreams of sin. It sees no separation, and it looks on everyone, on every circumstance, all happenings and all events, without the slightest fading of the light it sees. Our lesson for this week is to learn to see each person as the divine center point of consciousness, the divine I, God wrapped in flesh. To be able to look past the body, which tells us that we are separate, that there's a boundary between I and you, and to see all people without the slightest fading of the light that we carry within ourselves. And remember, what we see in another is what we have within. So if we see darkness in another divine expression, that's because we ourselves have not fully embraced our own light. Our saying for this week is God is in him or her, whoever you happen to be with. Or whatever variation of this phrase is meaningful to you. Oftentimes I will say, there's God. There comes God. God is right in front of me. Repeat this phrase as often as you need to bring yourself back to an awareness of God and the people around you. To help you connect with this truth in a tangible and life-changing way, I've included 3 links in the description of this video. First is a link to a guided meditation, which will take you through the process of finding God in the people around you. Second is a link to a PDF document containing recommended exercises and activities to take this week's lesson to the next level. Third is a link to my discussion group, Love Covered Life Official Discussion Group, on Facebook, where you can discuss your journey in a safe environment. 2 final notes for you. First, feel free to submit your questions, your comments, your experiences, anything relating to this week's lesson that you would like to share in the comment section of this video. I will be going live 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, and I will pick out some comments and questions to respond to. And lastly, if you have a Facebook or Instagram, take a picture of what or who you're seeing the Creator in this week. Post it to your stories or your feed with the caption, "See the Creator." Tag me and I will reshare as many of your posts as I can. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for joining me on this 4-week adventure. It's been my joy to share these last 4 weeks with you. If you've enjoyed this, be sure to stay subscribed to my channel because I do plan to offer more classes in the future. Stay tuned for updates about that. Be loved, be happy, be at peace, and thank you for watching.